Coming up, our series. Wait a minute. Tom, is that you working the camera?
Keep leaning out of your close-up.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
There has been new progress in talks, and currently the onus is indeed on Hamas. There is a deal on the table, and they need to take it.
One of the things that really worries my family and worries me is that it's arguably not in Prime Minister Netanyahu's political interest to close a deal.
Hello, I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. As those protests sparked by the Israel-Hamas war continue on college campuses across the country, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is back in Saudi Arabia tonight, pushing a ceasefire deal. These meetings come on the heels of a phone call between President Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The two leaders discussed a deal that would halt Israel's operations across the Palestinian territories in return for the release of hostages. Today, Blinken urged Hamas to swiftly accept Israel's latest proposal for a temporary truce in return for the release of those still being held hostage.
Hamas has before it a proposal that is extraordinarily generous on the part of Israel. And in this moment, the only thing standing between the people of Gaza and a ceasefire is Hamas.
And Weijia Jiang joins us now from the White House. Hi, Weijia, good to see you. So what more do we know about what exactly Israel is offering here in this latest deal? And where do things stand in the negotiation process?
Well, Caitlin, understandably, they are not revealing many details about what is in the current deal and what's on the table. But what's important here is that we just heard Secretary Blinken say that Israel is being incredibly generous in what it is offering when it comes likely to the agreement to a ceasefire and the amount of humanitarian aid that could pass through, which is, of course, two things that the U.S. has already been applying pressure on. And so administration officials are not revealing those nitty-gritty details which can make or break an agreement in public. But certainly the fact that he is there again, that the president is scheduled to speak with the leaders of Qatar and Egypt sometime this afternoon. These are all really important signals, Caitlin, about the progress that is being made.
Yeah, to that point, Weijia, what role is the White House really playing in all of these talks? And what happens if they don't succeed? Have they kind of gone there yet?
Well, so the White House does not talk directly with Hamas, which it considers a terrorist organization. So throughout this entire progress, they have been brokering it alongside those other countries that I've mentioned that are in direct communication. But certainly that doesn't mean that they are not applying pressure in their own way. And on the flip side of that, as we just saw from our colleague Margaret Brennan, Hamas has released recently hostage videos that shows proof of life for at least two Americans, hostages, who have been detained since October 7th. And so there are these back channels, but also public ways to engage each other without doing so immediately. But certainly everything that the president says, that Secretary Blinken says, is a way to signal to Hamas just how critical it is for them to accept the current deal that's on the table.
And Weijia, as you know, the headlines over the past several days have been, focused on these protests all over college campuses. How is President Biden navigating that? It also seems to be a potential political issue.
Well, that's why he's trying to do it very carefully. And he himself has not really said much except that he understands where the protesters are coming from. He also says he understands where pro-Palestinian protesters are coming from. And just today, the press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, was pressed about whether President Biden has been in touch with any leaders, specifically at Columbia University, which is sort of at the center of all of this. And she told me that there were no conversations to read out, but she stressed that the president supports the right to a peaceful protest, but he condemns any form of anti-Semitism or any kind of demonstration or protest that is trying to elicit hate speech or violence. And so they have to be really careful here, Caitlin, because as you mentioned, this is a very politically charged issue. And he's trying to say that, this is a private institution and it's up to the leaders there to make those decisions.
And as we just talked about in your reporting, comes at a critical time that they're trying to negotiate a deal here as well. Weijia Jiang, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Sure.
And over on Capitol Hill, the House is back in session today, but a push to oust Speaker Mike Johnson still looms over his head. Scott MacFarlane is on the Hill for us tonight. Scott, good to see you. So it seems like all eyes are on Speaker Johnson and whether he can stay in this job.
There was that provocative effort from Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia a few weeks ago when she formally pushed the button you have to push to begin a challenge to potentially oust Speaker Johnson. We kept pressing her as to when she was going to do it, when she was going to make the next move necessary to force the vote. And she kept saying she hasn't decided on timing. And then she told us about a week and a half ago she was expecting this train to pick up momentum during last week's district work period, with the assumption constituents would pressure their members of Congress to get behind her effort and oust the speaker. And rather than pick up steam, Caitlin, it seems like the train rolled backwards a little bit. She has not picked up new names to endorse the plan, nor is there this fervor as the U.S. House returns here tonight. Congresswoman Greene is carrying a unique amount of leverage and demanding and commanding quite a platform of media attention for as long as she wields this threat. And it looks like she's going to continue to wield it for an indefinite period moving forward.
She certainly knows how to do that. Scott, I'm curious how Democrats are factoring in here. Are we in a situation where Democrats could be the ones to save Speaker Johnson, and kind of how tenable is that kind of situation?
There's no unanimity among Democrats on this, and Democratic leadership has advised some of their members, maybe keep your powder dry on this one, don't make any demonstrative commitments. But it doesn't take long. If you go fishing around here for some Democrat who's willing to say, including on the record, yeah, I'd intervene to save the speaker, if for no other reason he put that Ukraine aid bill that was necessary for the Ukrainian forces on the floor in defiance of his own party. Tom Suozzi, the newest elected Democrat from New York State in a very purple district, said he'd do so. Jared Moskowitz, the progressive from Florida, has intimated he'd do so. There's a range of Democrats right there. Adam Smith, ranking Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, has intimated the same. So you have Democrats saying they'd do it if necessary. For now, this is a unique moment where the minority party is helping the majority speaker. It's not impossible to conceive of circumstances, Caitlin, in which that dynamic changes.
Yeah, notable, especially since the majority party is the majority party by just such a slim margin. Scott, we were just talking with Weijia about these protests across the country at college campuses. I mean, notably, Speaker Johnson went to Columbia last week to give a speech there in light of these protests. But I'm curious kind of how other members of Congress are reacting, navigating this situation that we're seeing across the country.
Certainly, this issue has taken a prominence that we didn't expect it to have at the Capitol when this year began. These protests have certainly captured the attention of Congress. And you'll see a shift in the topics of some of the hearings and the topics of some of the proclamations and floor speeches here. There are a series of proposals, some of which are up for a vote as early as this week, which seem to be messaging bills that may not be things that pass into law, but communicate the sentiment of Congress in some certain direction on this. In fact, Caitlin, as the afternoon began here in Washington, there were a group of Democrats, including some pragmatic moderate Democrats, who co-signed a letter to Columbia University's leadership saying they have to do more to push back on these encampments and this unrest. You have some congruence in the statements from Republicans and Democrats on issues about what should be done by university leaders. But what should be done by Congress? Well, Congress is capable of very little agreement right now, but they do agree this is a topic worth discussing publicly.
Certainly, and one that that we may expect to persist heading into the November elections. Scott McFarland, thank you so much for your time and reporting. We appreciate it. And at least 3 law enforcement officials have been killed in a shooting in Charlotte, North Carolina. Police say the officers are local sheriff's deputies and part of a U.S. Marshals task force. They were serving a warrant when the suspect opened fire. It's believed that as many as 6 people in total have been shot. At least 1 shooting suspect is located and is deceased. And burying the hatchet after a bruising primary, Donald Trump meets with former rival Ron DeSantis. Our panel is here to discuss. You're streaming America Decides.
Mr. President, there's a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about.
Does this carrier strike group stand ready?
Just incredible to see there's an active search and rescue operation going on 12 hours after this accident.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off.
That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That desired farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Donald Trump's New York criminal trial resumes tomorrow. The court was closed today due to Passover. The presumptive Republican presidential nominee spent part of his long weekend down south. Donald Trump met with former Republican rival Ron DeSantis on Sunday. A senior Trump source says that they met for several hours at the Florida governor's request. And this marked the first meeting since DeSantis ended his presidential campaign back in January and, of course, endorsed the former president. Shelby Talcott and Finn Gomez join us now. Shelby is politics reporter for Semaphore, and Finn is CBS News political director. So a lot of political news to get to with you two, color coordinated in purple, so perfect way to start this Monday off. Finn, let's start with this DeSantis meeting. We haven't really heard much from Ron DeSantis on the political front. He's kind of been focused on Florida. What's the significance of this hours-long meeting that he had with Trump?
It looks like their relationship, that frosty relationship that we remember from the primary, has essentially thawed. Why has it thawed? For two reasons. One is that the fundraising operation that the Ron DeSantis has, not only in Florida, but around the country. You remember he reached a milestone amount of money in that primary, and then Donald Trump and his allies want to tap into that. However, the meeting itself, according to our sources, was called by the Florida governor to set this up, in part because, Ron DeSantis wants to be seen associated with the former president. He's, of course, the nominee, the standard bearer for the country, and potentially the next president. So he wants to get close and align himself with Trump. But at the same time, what I'm also hearing is he has his eyes set on 28. And he's already establishing and laying down that road to his next bid, perhaps.
So making amends with Donald Trump will be critical, and we've seen others do this as well to align themselves with Trump. Shelby, is there anything that Trump can gain from DeSantis here by this meeting?
Well, as Finn said, Ron DeSantis has a huge donor network, and as we know, Joe Biden has a lot more money going into this 2024 election than Donald Trump does. So certainly he has that to gain, and I think that's significant. And remember, Donald Trump often views things very he's very transactional. Right. So he doesn't need to be best friends with Ron DeSantis. Right. But if he can help him, and then therefore Ron DeSantis gets helped potentially in 28, they're both scratching each other's backs, so to speak.
But to be clear, this is not any sort of VP chatter going on here.
And they're not buddies, by the way. They're still not. There's still a lot of
work left to do before
indeed.
2028, perhaps. But I do want to talk about VP chatter because we have had some interesting headlines, to say the least, from Kristi Noem. She, of course, is the South Dakota governor. I can't believe I'm saying this. She's defending killing a dog, which is something that she revealed in her book. She said, quote, she followed the law and was being a responsible parent and dog owner. What is going on here?
I know plenty of responsible dog owners who are liberals and also who are MAGA conservatives who do not kill their own dogs. So I think that you've seen a lot of folks who have been openly critical about this. Her action that she took, she writes about in the book, about shooting that 14-month-old puppy, by many accounts. We know, according to the sources, they have told us that some of her advisors had asked her, do not put this in your book. It's going to be bad PR. They reminded her of the Mitt Romney 2012 incident where he put the dog on, talk about putting the family dog. Seamus, yes, right. And now, of course, we have this incident that happened with her, and she insisted on putting it in the book. Her inner circle insisted on putting it in the book, and now there's just been fallout, and we've seen her stock drop. So we're hearing, according to our sources, on the VP stakes.
Interesting. And as Finn said, Finn knows I am a unabashed dog mom, and my dog is not the most well-behaved, but he is still in our condo in D.C. living. But when I talk to Donald Trump's aides and people close to him about this specific story, the general consensus is just essentially yikes. There's confusion over why she would include this in her book. People have noted that she was already sort of lower on the list, if really on the list, as serious vice presidential contenders at all for various reasons. But this certainly does not help her rise.
It is really difficult to see how getting this out there, proactively getting this out there, would do anything to serve you politically. So perhaps not surprising that she's receiving all of this negative criticism. Speaking of those kind of aligned with Trump and perhaps falling out of favor, Kari Lake is someone that we're watching, obviously running in a key Senate race in Arizona. Finn, I know you've got some reporting on kind of how she's doing in terms of Trump. I mean, that's such a key battleground state for him.
Right. What we're hearing, what CBS News can confirm, is that there has been sort of a souring, if you will, of that relationship between Donald Trump and Kari Lake. There is, she has been actively going to Mar-a-Lago at times at the irritation of the former president, how often she does attend she is not being considered, to our knowledge, as a serious VP contender anymore. And frankly, part of it is the fact that she didn't do so well in 2022 when she ran there. She lost, right?
Yeah, I heard, I asked maybe a year and a half ago, so long before any serious conversations about vice presidential picks were happening, about Kari Lake, because there were rumors that she could potentially be on a vice presidential list. And people close to Trump essentially said, she is a loser, right? She lost. And that is not something that Donald Trump can be associated with for a vice presidential pick. And again, it goes back to that transactional, how do these people help Donald Trump win the election? That is his focus.
That's kind of the priority here. And interesting that they would say that, considering that he has not conceded, of course, his own loss in 2020.
Right.
I wish we had more time, but we could talk forever about all of these political hot topics on a Monday. Thank you very much, Finn and Shelby. We'll be hearing from you a lot soon. We appreciate it. And coming up, we've got new CBS News polling on several key Senate races. Speaking of Senate races, Antony Salvanto joins us next to dig into the numbers. You're streaming America Decides.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing or bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
Or you can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
CBS News has new polling out of several key Senate races that could determine the balance of power in Washington. CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Antony Salvanto, joins us now to break down some of these numbers. Hey there, Anthony. Good to see you. So walk us through some of your latest findings. I mean, I know we're all focused on battleground races on the presidential level, but there are some really fascinating key Senate races here as well.
There are indeed, and so I'm glad you asked, right? In a presidential year, we often get distracted and say, well, what about the Senate? But the Senate is up this year. It is competitive. I think there are about a half dozen, maybe a little more, Senate seats that are going to determine control. These are two of them. Maybe not the most endangered, as you'll see from this polling right here. Incumbent Tammy Baldwin up in this one, 7 points in Wisconsin, right? And then in Pennsylvania, you get, again, incumbent Bob Casey up here over Dave McCormick, pretty sizably, okay? Again, 7 points. Couple of important things here. One is that in both cases, they're running ahead of the presidential candidate, Joe Biden, right? I just showed you these 7 points lead, and I'll scroll over here just to remind everybody, in these states, you've got Biden in Michigan in this case and at +2, and then Pennsylvania, he's down 1 in each of those, right? So they're running ahead of the president. That's certainly of note. On the other hand, you're going to look at those. Some folks will read the tea leaves and go, well, they're under 50%. And that means they don't already have enough support to kind of lock in where they need to be. So things could certainly change at that point. But those are the two key things I think about there. Both incumbents, you know, you might go and say maybe Ohio, maybe Montana are more vulnerable seats for the Democrats, but these will certainly be two others that we'll be watching, Caitlin.
Yes, certainly keeping an eye on those. Let's go back to the presidential, Anthony, because there are some, big concerns about third-party candidates and kind of the impact that they will have on this election, specifically RFK Jr. You have some data. What's that telling us? What can you tell us?
Sure. Well, it depends who might be concerned here, right? If we put Kennedy on the ballot test in Michigan, where he's on the ballot now, along with Jill Stein, this is how it shapes up. Actually, it ends up still the same at +2 Biden, right? But we've got 9% Kennedy. Now, I want to say a couple of things about third-party candidates here. One is that historically, don't know what's going to happen here, historically, they poll much better than they actually get. Why is that? Everybody should know, like, for context going forward, a lot of the people who say they're going to vote for a third-party candidate might switch at the last moment because they want to back somebody that they think has a better chance to win. Sometimes these aren't the kind of voters who typically show up at all. And when we ask the question, pundits do this all the time, who are they pulling from? I'll tell you a couple of things. Some of these Kennedy voters look like they might agree more with Donald Trump on a number of issues, right? Finances being one of them. So that's certainly something to watch going forward. The other part, though, is are they people who would be likely to vote at all? So it's not a direct one-to-one as that ballot test comes in, who they pull from. Anyway, that's the story out of Michigan, Caitlin.
No, that's important context. And as we know, these races are so close, so all of those margins will count. Anthony Salvanto, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And the vice president is launching a multi-state tour. What she's doing to try to mobilize black voters ahead of the November election. They're streaming America Decides.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Okay, let's go. You guys good?
Hey.
All right, we good?
Keep going. The clock, it's ticking.
Off we go.
60 minutes. 60 minutes.
60 minutes.
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education. Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides, Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Vice President Kamala Harris kicked off a tour focusing on economic opportunity today. The first stop of her nationwide tour was in Atlanta, that key city and that key battleground state. The vice president worked to drum up support with African American and young voters.
We have so many entrepreneurs. We have so many people who have incredible ideas. They are innovative, hardworking, ambitious, have aspirations, have vision. None of that we lack for in the community. But for most folks, we lack access to the resources that will feed those ambitions and those aspirations.
And our Nydia Cavazos is following it all in Atlanta for us. Nydia, good to see you. So what exactly is the purpose of this tour and kind of the significance of starting it in Atlanta?
Hi, Caitlin. It's nice to join you this afternoon. And well, like you said, Vice President Kamala Harris was here in Atlanta, Georgia, and this was to officially kick off her economic opportunity tour. The importance of this tour was to pretty much highlight what the administration has been doing when it comes to economic policies and what the administration has done when it comes to serving low-income communities and also minorities and how they have benefited from several economic policies from the Biden and Harris administration. But overall, the importance of Harris's visit to Atlanta is that Georgia is a battleground state, and it is one of the key states where they are trying to recruit Black voters. We know that Black voters were part of an essential group that was critical to Biden's success in 2020, but it is also a group that the Biden and Harris campaign and administration are currently having a hard time engaging. And so this economic opportunity tour was officially launched in Atlanta, but it was specifically targeting this minority group. And they were pretty much here to say the administration has served you, and they were here to outline every way that they've been able to do so.
And Nydia, this comes as we have new CBS polling in some key battleground states, not in Georgia, but in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, where a majority of voters there are saying that they feel the economy was better under Trump than it is now. How much of this tour that the vice president is embarking on is an effort to try to change that feeling or perception?
It's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to change voters' perception here that, in fact, the economy and their financial status was not necessarily better under a Trump administration. And so they're out here trying to change voters, focusing on minorities. Today, they were focusing on Black voters. But essentially, this speaks to their efforts. And now the Biden and Harris campaign, they've made it clear that they're aware of where the polls stand, but they're tackling these issues. We also have President Biden as well as Vice President Harris, who are both actively campaigning on economic policies and trying to change this perception one voter at a time and one battleground state at a time.
Nydia Cavasso, 6 months to go until Election Day, so they've got some time, but the pressure seems to be on. We appreciate your reporting. Thank you so much. And for more, let's bring in Joel Payne and Leslie Sanchez. Joel is a CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist, and Leslie is a CBS News political analyst and a Republican strategist. Great to see you both on this Monday. Thanks for being here. Let's start with Kamala Harris and this outreach to minority voters. I mean, Joel, we've seen in our polling that Biden's support among Black Americans has dropped compared to his level of support in 2020. How concerned should the campaign be about that?
You should be concerned about everything. You should panic about nothing. That is what I would tell any smart political strategist right now.
Joel Payne's words of wisdom.
Joel
there you
Payne,
go.
words of wisdom. I mean, look, I think you should absolutely be concerned about it. Black voters are obviously a key block in Biden's 2020 victory, particularly in a state like Georgia. So you've got to have confidence with those voters, or make sure that those voters have confidence in you, your economic remedies, and kind of tell the story of what the last 3 years have been for them versus what they were the 4 years prior under Donald Trump. And I can tell you, talking to folks around the president and the campaign and the White House, they think they have a good story to tell. So not surprising that they would embark on this. I think you're going to see more of it. And I think you're going to see more targeting of these communities of color. That's a place where Trump is making gains against Biden. It's not necessarily with white voters. Actually, Joe Biden, it seems like from our polling, seems to be kind of holding serve there. It's with those communities of colors that he's struggling.
Yeah, Joel, that's a good segue to Leslie, because Leslie, we've talked so much over the past several years about how Trump has made inroads among Latino voters, but this drop among Black support is really notable as well. I mean, is there a real avenue there for Trump?
It's unprecedented. I don't think you can really put a fine enough point on how significant it is, not just for Trump, for the Republican Party. Consistently, if you look at Latino voters, consistently for the last 11 elections, it's about 31.5% support. For longer than that, it's about 9 or 10% support among Black voters for Republican candidates, and Trump has doubled that. Will they stay with him consistently? Will that erosion kind of settle and calcify? I think Republicans hope so. But it's really this economic issue, and I think that's the disconnect. I love the campaign slogan, the campaign. I'll put it on a T-shirt and wear that around, Joel. I love the idea, but in practicality, we can't convince something of something other than their fundamental belief. Like in our business, we change attitude, their intention of how they see the candidate, and ultimately their behavior, how they vote. But they are looking at their bank account every day. They are looking at that car they want to buy. They are looking at those high interest rates they have to have and the prices of just basic goods and services. And that is where kind of the rubber meets the road in terms of the pain pressure and the pain point for communities that don't have vast amount of savings, working class voters. And in many cases, those are the communities of color.
Yeah, and I mean, just generally, voters don't necessarily measure the economy the same way that we do on paper, right?
I like a data sheet just like anybody else.
Exactly. It is oftentimes about what you're feeling. I mean, Joel, to that point, what was so significant about our new battleground state polls were, and I wonder if we can put this graphic up on the screen, is how voters are feeling about the economy now. Not feeling good about it now. But what was interesting to me is that looking back at the Trump years, so now looking back at the Trump years, 60-something% across these battleground states viewed it favorably. But when we asked them the same question back in 2020, when Trump was president, they viewed it unfavorably. So what's going on here? And this seems to be kind of a warning sign for Democrats.
Incumbency disadvantage, right? And I think we're in an era where I think voters are generally skeptical of anyone who is in power, who's responsible, because frankly, they haven't been happy with anything from Democrats, from Republicans. Obviously, I'm a Democrat. I think there's a better story to tell. But if you just talk to your average voter, they don't have faith and confidence really in everybody who is supposed to be in power. And so I think what you're talking about there reflects the fact that probably the hardest thing to be right now in politics is an incumbent president. We might be in a valley where we have a lot of, the White House going back from one party to the other party, because you're just not seeing resurfacing and rebuilding of trust in institutions like you're going to need to see for voters to feel confident again that their elected officials are listening to them.
Yeah, and Leslie, to that point, what does that mean for Trump? I mean, I think Trump has benefited from kind of, being out of office, and you kind of remember things differently when someone is out of office. But, now obviously he's standing trial. He's in the public sphere every day now. Is there an opportunity for the Biden campaign to kind of message to voters about Trump, or do you think, how does he navigate this?
I think people have already made up their mind what they think about Trump. It's astounding. It doesn't take a lot of education. You don't need a treatise or some sort of big, encyclopedia, old words. Yeah. That's Google, kids. To understand what people feel, about the former president. But what I think when they look at their own circumstances, their personal finances, they'll say interest rates were low. There was a possibility of buying a home. There was a possibility of taking care of my parents, in a way that I could stretch that dollar. And now they don't have those options available to them. So it's very much those parochial decisions. And then you add some of the other pressures. They see the border security. They see, there's tremendous frustration. And I would agree, it's mercurial. And they're going, as long as we are highly polarized, there will be a series of too close to call elections. And I think that's what we're going to see in these particular 5 battlegrounds.
It seems interesting, though, that they've kind of memory hold 2020, COVID, right? Which, again, they were very unhappy with Donald Trump's administration of government during that period of time. But it does seem like, for whatever reason, maybe it's a bit of voters, out of sight, out of mind, trying not to remember that time. It doesn't seem like voters are holding Trump accountable for 2020 for COVID. And by the way, talking to folks around Biden, they want to remind voters of what Trump was like leading the country through that crisis period. I think they feel like that's an important closing argument as well.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, because that's something I certainly noticed covering the Republican primaries, that was just kind of memory hold, I think is a good way to describe that. Joel and Leslie, we will have plenty to discuss over the next 6 months, but this is a good start. We appreciate you being here. Thank you. And the World Central Kitchen is resuming operations in Gaza following that fatal airstrike. The aid organization says it has nearly 300 trucks with 8 million meals ready to enter through the Rafah crossing. Earlier this month, 7 of the group's workers were killed in an Israeli airstrike in Gaza. The Israeli army has apologized for the killings after admitting its soldiers did not follow protocols and were not given crucial information about the pre-approved aid mission. Trump talk, the presumptive nominee's evolving rhetoric, why we've never heard anything like it before. We'll take a deep dive into what Trump has been saying to supporters. You're streaming America Decides.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more. Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go, with the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen.
She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
At the CBS Evening News, we focus on solutions, finding solutions to healthcare problems, how much money we can spend on the groceries, finding solutions to help people understand what are the right choices to make for you and your family.
Welcome back to America Decides. A new article from the New York Times Magazine analyzes the rhetoric of former President Donald Trump and how it's evolved since 2016. Charles Homans writes, quote, Trump has always said what he means in his speeches. He is also constantly obscuring it by instinct or by design, contradicting his own statements or waving them off as jokes, scribbling over them with tangents and lies and just plain weirdness. One of the first things I noticed watching him last year, though, is that this is less true than it once was. And Charles Homans joins us now. He's national politics reporter for The Times. James, Charles, good to see you. I really appreciate it. You've attended 7 Trump rallies in 7 states since October. Can you kind of explain this evolution in his rhetoric that you've witnessed?
Sure. I mean, it's interesting going out on and watching Trump on the trail now versus when he was president, after he was president, when he was campaigning in 2016. You know, the speeches are a little less improvised than they used to be, and you see more kind of repetition of themes more clearly than you used to. And as I write in the story, I think that if you look at the way he talked before, it was very much, you know, this sort of us versus them rhetoric, but it was a little bit longer on the us, and he was talking very much about his supporters and kind of what he would do for them. And now it's really very much about them. It's about the enemy and about all the forces that he sees and claims are sort of arrayed against him and his supporters, and, you know, what he intends to do about it if he's elected president.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of those supporters, how have they changed between then and now?
I mean, it's interesting, like, since the last time he ran, I mean, really, since before the last time he ran in 2020, you know, he's so fully taken over the Republican Party that you can't really, I think, distinguish all that clearly between, you know, it used to be that Trump supporters were, you know, I write in the story, this kind of pirate ship energy about his rallies, even when he was president to a degree. And that's less true now. It feels like you're just sort of looking at, you know, and talking to a real cross-section of the Republican electorate.
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously the big headlines involving Trump are these criminal cases that he's contending with. But it's interesting because you described them as an extraordinary gift. Can you kind of contextualize that for us?
Sure. I mean, the story that Trump tells at his rallies is very much how his presidency was thwarted by Democrats, by, you know, the quote-unquote deep state, by the media, by all these enemies that are sort of surrounding him all the time. And he's really used the trials and talking about his various prosecutions in his rallies to kind of extend that narrative, and uses that as sort of an example of, you know, what he's up against. And a point that he makes over and over again is that, you know, he has a line, you know, they're coming for me, you know, because I'm standing in their way, or they're coming for me because they can't get to you. You know, he presents himself as sort of this bulwark between these forces and his supporters. And of course, there's no real evidence that there are prosecutions pending against his supporters, but it's very much, you know, central to his narrative at this point.
Yeah, I mean, another issue obviously central to his narrative has been immigration, and his rhetoric around immigration has, you know, been controversial since the day he announced his first bid for the presidency in 2016. But I'm curious if that rhetoric has evolved over these past 8 years.
It very much has, and especially in the last couple of years, and even really while he's been campaigning this year. He's kind of shifted into talking about that more as the crisis on the border becomes a bigger issue in general. But the way that he talks about it is actually different from how he talked about it when he first ran for president, when, as you said, this was a big theme of his campaign. Now he really presents it as a conspiracy by Democrats to let these people into the country to build this base of power from which they can govern forever. And of course, there's no evidence that this is true. But this is a message that he really hits home now, which is a real step beyond the way that he talked about immigration as president and when he was running in 2016.
And I'm curious, Charles, what kind of effect has this had on other politicians? You have kind of this moment referring to Joe Wilson back in 2009 where he said, "You lie," and you say, that kind of, pre-Trump politics is exotically distant now. Have others kind of emulated this style now?
Certainly. I mean, I think in a way it's interesting. Trump has become such a dominant figure in Republican politics that he's become a less distinctive figure in a way. He's clearly very distinctive and has a profile unlike anybody else in the party, of course. But, as a matter of style and even the substance of his politics, you can point to all sorts of figures. Marjorie Taylor Greene is a great example of somebody who's really kind of embraced and I think kind of understands how these politics work and has sort of, particularly on immigration, played a very vocal role, confronting President Biden at the State of the Union in kind of doing what Trump has been doing.
Right. Well, Charles Homans, this is a fascinating piece. I encourage everyone to read it, and a very consequential piece as we're heading into November. Thank you so much for your time and reporting.
Thanks for having me.
And coming up, are Black voters backing away from Biden? The new polling that shows the president has more work to do in keeping this key constituency, as some of them are saying Donald Trump may get their vote this November. You're streaming America Decides.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that? Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
This really
Is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean?
What does that mean in
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
What happened?
Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
On Face the Nation, the way to learn is to listen.
We may have a recession.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, really good.
Is it good?
Mm-hmm.
Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
So if we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education. Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides.
When people say who's first to get in the morning, that would be me.
Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
Day to day, that first draft of history, it happens right here.
We're going to uplift you. We're going to send you out your way.
We take you places, we teach you new things, and we make you feel like, it's not all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
Mr. President, there's a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about.
I'm Nora O'Donnell with the CBS Evening News.
Where are these coming from? These are illegal, correct?
China invades Taiwan. What will the U.S. Navy do?
They are just miles from Gaza. This is the moment of impact, recorded on this clock.
We're on a Navy MH-60 helicopter right over the Red Sea.
Just incredible to see there's an active search and rescue operation going on 12 hours after this accident.
Oh, my God.
How do you define happiness?
I call it happiness.
Are you out there?
Welcome to my studio. It's a wonderful place to paint.
I made it to the top!
They just told us we had to go. This Humvee just pulled up and said, it's time to leave.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
Welcome back to America Decides. According to CBS News polling, President Biden is losing support among Black voters in Georgia. That's compared to how he did in 2020. He still has a commanding lead over former President Trump among this key voting bloc, but waning support from them in a battleground state could have major ramifications for the general election. Our Torian Small sat down with several Black male voters in the state who are backing Republicans. So, Torian, this is a fascinating conversation. I'm so eager to see what you learned from them. Why are these voters that you spoke to inclined to some conservative ideas?
Yeah, so two things, Caitlin. I met with canvassers with the New Georgia Project. It's a left-leaning Black voter advocacy group in the state, and they're telling me that they're seeing young Black men be more open to considering Trump because they are the targets of misinformation. Part of that is the accomplishments or opportunities or these perceived opportunities for that community is being attributed to Trump in their minds wrongly instead of Biden or even Obama. But this group of Black conservative men I sat down with said that they want to buck the idea that Black men have to belong to the Democratic Party. Here's a bit of our conversation.
I think that there's a misnomer, there's a social fallacy that surrounds the view that because the vast majority of Black men voted for the Democrat Party, that there isn't a lot of conservative values there. Black men are very much looking for their opportunity to do it on their own, and they're not looking for necessarily for government to deliver something to them.
That's 41-year-old Azad Ahmadi. He was actually an Obama-Trump voter.
Oh,
he
interesting.
flipped in 2016, and that's really his introduction to this conservative movement there. But again, they're looking to reject the idea that Black people have to come home to the Democratic Party in November.
Yeah, that's fascinating to see that transformation. You mentioned that you spoke to a liberal-leaning group about Black voters, but you've also spoken to the Republican Party about their outreach to Black voters. What are they doing? What did they tell you?
Well, so there's a clear disparity in outreach efforts post 2022. We've seen a lot of those community centers or outreach centers shutter after 2022 happened. In Atlanta, I went to a center in College Park, just right outside of Atlanta. It was the African American Community Center there. That closed down, and nothing has replaced it. I talked to the same conservative group about that. If they see that as a problem, this is what they had to say. Do you think Republicans are doing enough outreach in Black communities?
We can do a better job.
We have an opportunity to get a message out, and we're doing everything that we can to take advantage of that opportunity.
This is something the Biden campaign is seizing on. They have a pretty expansive network for outreach specifically, but as we saw with Vice President Harris today, they're looking to target Black men as part of this tour that they're rolling out and started to roll out in Georgia today.
Yeah, with Harris in Georgia. I mean, on that note, again, we mentioned that he's still leading among this group, but it's not a monolithic group at all. What is the Biden campaign doing to try to reach those voters, kind of knowing that that support has been waning a bit?
They're looking to be message heavy, right? So part of what I talked about with the New Georgia Project, their biggest concern was the fact that they believe Black voters aren't necessarily attributing some of the successes or advancements in the community to the Biden campaign, which is why we see Harris out in the campaign today. I talked to a campaign spokesperson, Michael Tyler, from the Biden-Harris campaign. This is what he had to say about the job of messaging moving forward.
Yeah, well, I'd say this is exactly what a campaign is for, right? To relentlessly communicate, do the outreach, talk to voters day in and day out from now until Election Day. That's exactly what this campaign is doing. That's why we made the earliest and largest investment in reaching Black voters going all the way back to August of last year, right? Running ads in places like Atlanta, Detroit, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, making sure that we are directly talking about that record of accomplishment.
And they're doing this type of outreach through the coordination of both state and local Democratic parties. On the Republican side, like we talked about, that outreach is really depending heavily on these ancillary groups like the Georgia Black Republican Council, like the Black Conservative Federation. They don't have the infrastructure they once had to do the comprehensive outreach to the Black community that they used to.
So some ground to make up here, but still those numbers, I'm sure, startling for Democrats. Key voting bloc in a key state. Thank you for covering it for us. Torian, thank you so much. That was great. Great to see that interview. And that does it for us today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.
Welcome to the Daily Report for April 29th, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. In the war between Israel and Hamas, a lot of threads are coming together on this Monday. First, an Israeli ceasefire deal, described as extraordinarily generous on the part of Israel by the Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who is making another tour through the region. We'll tell you what we know about that deal and whether it has a chance